Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling a topic that's a bit elusive.
Yeah.
Presence. What is
Mhm.
it? Why does it matter? And can we actually learn it? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You've sent over a really interesting mix of stuff this time. An excerpt from a book on presence, some personal anecdotes from the author,
Interesting.
even some interviews with people like Julianne Moore
Oh, wow.
and Neil Gaiman. So I think our mission today is to try to distill the essence of presence, maybe uncover some secrets along the way,
Okay.
and give you some concrete takeaways to help you boost your own confidence and impact, especially those high-pressure situations
Hmm.
that we all face from time to time.
It's funny, isn't it? We all sort of know it when we
Right.
see it presence,
Yeah.
but trying to actually define it, trying to put it into words,
Yeah.
it's surprisingly difficult. It's one of those things that's almost easier to feel than it is to explain.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like, you can't really describe what makes a great song great.
You just know it.
You know it when you hear it.
Mm-hmm.
But for this deep dive, we need to go a little bit beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
What can we actually learn from these sources about what presence actually is?
Well, one thing that kind of comes up again and again is this idea of aligning your inner self, your thoughts, your feelings, your values
Mm-hmm.
with how you actually express yourself, your outward expression. And when those two things are in sync,
Right.
when those things are aligned,
Yeah.
it just creates this sense of authenticity that people are just naturally drawn to.
Okay. So it's not about putting on an act or trying to be somebody that you're not.
Right.
It's really about tapping into something genuine within yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we got some fantastic definitions from our listeners from all over the world.
Oh, cool.
Rohan from Australia defined presence as confidence without arrogance.
I like that.
And Majid from the UAE described it as all your senses agreeing on one thing at the same time.
Ooh, I love those. Those are great. They really capture, the essence of what we're talking about here. So we've kind of got a handle on what presence is. But why should we care? What difference does it actually make in our lives?
Well, one of the sources you sent over, a study by Lakshmi Balachandra, looked at venture capital pitches and found something really surprising. The strongest predictor of success wasn't the entrepreneur's background or even the brilliance of their idea.
Wow.
It was their confidence, their comfort level, and their passion.
Interesting. So it's not just about having a great idea, it's about how you present it.
Exactly. And the reason this matters is that those qualities,
Hmm.
the confidence, the comfort level, the passion, they signal genuine belief in the idea,
Right.
which in turn makes investors more likely to believe in it too. I mean, think
Mhm.
about it. If someone is pitching you something, but they seem uncertain or unenthusiastic,
Yeah.
are you really going to want to invest?
Yeah. Definitely not. It's all about the energy they bring to the table. But this isn't just about business pitches, is it?
No, not at all.
I mean, this applies to all kinds of situations in life, right?
Absolutely. Anytime you're trying to persuade somebody, you're trying to influence someone leading a team, asking for a raise,
Right.
you're just trying to get your point across in a meeting presence can really be a game changer.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so presence equals authenticity. And that translates to a greater impact, greater influence.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where I kind of get tripped up, because so many people, they try to manage their impression.
Right.
Like they're scripting their behavior
Yeah.
to try to seem more confident.
Mm.
But according to these sources that we've got, that can actually backfire. Why is that?
Well, I think it comes across as, inauthentic.
Right.
And it can even seem manipulative.
Yeah.
People can kind of sense that mismatch between what you're saying and how you're really feeling.
There's a story in one of the sources about these MBA interns
Oh, yeah.
who were so focused on appearing competent that they actually sabotaged themselves.
Oh,
They didn't get job offers, even though they had like amazing credentials.
Yeah.
Because they failed to build those genuine relationships with their colleagues.
So it raises the question, right?
Yeah.
Is it better to actually be competent or to just appear competent?
Right.
And most of the time, the answer is that authenticity is more important. So how do we reconcile that with the need to prepare
Yeah.
for those high stakes moments,
Yeah. I'm just going to just wing it every time, right?
All right.
One of the sources included this interview with Julianne Moore, the actress.
Oh, yeah.
And her approach to acting, I thought, was really interesting. She prepares meticulously for her roles,
Mhm.
but she also leaves room for the magic of the moment.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
And I think that's relevant for all of us, not just actors. Of course, preparation is important,
Right.
but don't get so caught up in scripting everything out that you lose that ability to be present and to adapt in the moment.
That reminds me of something that I struggle with sometimes, which is imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You know, that nagging feeling that you're not good enough.
Oh.
You're a fraud. You're just waiting to be exposed.
We hear about that a lot, and you're definitely not alone.
Yeah.
A lot of the sources that you sent over actually highlight just how common imposter syndrome is, even among really, really successful people.
One of the anecdotes that really stuck with me was about a student at Harvard who felt like an admissions mistake,
Wow.
even though they were surrounded by all these brilliant peers.
Yeah.
And then there was a story about a successful businessman
Uh-huh.
who secretly felt like a fraud despite all of his achievements.
It's so interesting because these stories really drive home the point that imposter syndrome can affect anyone. It doesn't matter your background or your accomplishments.
Yeah.
It's that voice that says, you don't belong here,
Right.
even when all the evidence suggests otherwise.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we've established that imposter syndrome is a real thing, and it can really undermine our presence. But what can we actually do about it? How do we silence that inner critic?
One of the things that the sources talk about is that imposter syndrome often comes from this disconnect between how we see ourselves internally and our actual achievements. So we achieve something great,
Right.
but then instead of celebrating it,
Yeah.
we kind of downplay it. We say, oh, it was just luck, or,
Yeah.
it was just because of the circumstances or whatever.
Yeah, it's like we're afraid to own our successes.
Exactly. It's almost like we don't believe we deserve it.
Right, right.
And that can create this really vicious cycle where the more we achieve, the more we fear being found out as a fraud,
Oh, yeah.
which can then lead to self-sabotage. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like we're setting ourselves up to fail because we don't believe in our own abilities.
Exactly. So one of the key strategies is to actually actively challenge those negative thoughts. When that voice pops up and says, you're not good enough,
Right.
ask yourself, what evidence do I have to support that?
Right.
And more often than not, you'll find that the evidence points in completely the opposite direction.
It's about kind of shifting that focus from self-doubt to self-affirmation.
Exactly. Yeah. Remind yourself of your strengths, your accomplishments, the times that you've overcome challenges, and try to focus on progress over perfection. Because imposter syndrome, it really thrives on that fear of not being perfect.
So instead of striving for this like unattainable ideal,
Yeah.
we should celebrate the small wins along the way.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Embrace the journey. Recognize that those setbacks are just part of the process.
Right.
And speaking of learning and process, one of the most powerful tools for cultivating presence and actually for combating imposter syndrome is the art of listening.
We touched on this earlier a bit with the story of Reverend Jeffrey Brown
Right.
and his work with those gang members in Boston. And he really stressed how important listening was in building trust and creating a space for dialogue.
And it's not just about active listening, nodding your head and making eye contact.
Right.
It's about really hearing and acknowledging the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it, even if you think they're completely wrong.
I think that can be really tough to do, especially when you're in a heated debate or a really difficult conversation.
Oh, yeah.
It's so easy to just get caught up in our own arguments and forget to actually listen to what the other person is trying to say.
It's a skill. It definitely takes practice.
Yeah.
But when you genuinely listen to someone, you create this sense of safety and respect, which can be incredibly disarming.
Right.
And it opens up these pathways for understanding and connection.
It's like listening becomes an act of presence in and of itself.
Exactly. You're totally present in that moment with the other person. You're not just waiting for your turn to speak.
That's a good point. That brings us to another interesting concept that I saw come up a few times in these sources, the distinction between personal power and social power.
Okay.
What's the difference?
Well, social power is what we usually think of when we hear the word power, It's the influence you have based on your position or your status or your connections,
Yeah, like CEOs, politicians, celebrity. So it's externally derived.
Exactly. But personal power, that's something different. It's kind of like an inner strength.
Right.
This sense of self-worth and agency that allows you to act in alignment with your own values and your beliefs regardless of your external circumstances.
Okay, so it's about knowing yourself, trusting your own judgment,
Right.
not being swayed by external pressures.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is that personal power can actually make your social power stronger When you're really grounded in your own values,
Yeah.
you're more likely to command respect and influence people, even if you don't have some fancy title or position of authority.
It's like
Yeah.
that saying, the most powerful person in the room is the one who doesn't need to prove it.
Exactly. And one of the sources talks about a guy named Stefan, who's this really successful financier.
Mm-hmm.
But despite all of his social influence, he really lacked that personal power.
His story really reminded me that you can have all the external trappings of success, the money, the status, the
Yeah.
fancy title, and still not actually feel powerful or fulfilled on the inside.
So yeah, I think Stefan's story is a great example of why it's so important to cultivate personal power. And one of the sources suggested that it starts with recognizing the difference between approaching behaviors and avoiding behaviors.
I'm not sure I follow.
So when we feel powerful, we're more likely to approach challenges and opportunities head on.
Okay.
You know, we're willing to take risks, to speak up,
Yeah.
to go after what we want.
So we're proactive, we're in control.
Exactly. But then when we feel powerless, we tend to avoid those same challenges, right?
Right.
We hold back because we're afraid or we doubt ourselves. It's like we're operating from a scarcity mindset,
Okay.
believing that there's not enough to go around.
Got it. So how do we shift from that avoiding mindset to a more approaching mindset?
Well, self-affirmation is really important here.
Mm.
When you remind yourself of your strengths and your values, your accomplishments,
Right.
you're basically priming your brain
Yeah.
to approach those challenges with more confidence
Right.
and resilience.
It's like we're giving ourselves a pep talk, reminding ourselves what we're capable of.
Exactly. And the more you do this,
Yeah.
the stronger those neural pathways become.
Mm.
It's like building a muscle.
Right. The more you use it,
Yeah.
the stronger it gets.
Absolutely.
So we're building personal power through self-awareness, self-affirmation,
Mm-hmm.
and approaching those challenges head on. But how does all of this tie back into presence?
Well, presence is really about bringing your full, authentic self to every situation.
Okay.
It's about being grounded in your values, owning your strengths, and expressing yourself with confidence and clarity.
And I guess cultivating personal power allows us to do that
Yeah,
more effectively. It gives us that inner strength and resilience
exactly.
to show up authentically, even when we're feeling nervous or insecure.
Right. It's about recognizing that true power doesn't come from a title or a position. It comes from within.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all of these pieces fit together now.
Hmm.
We've talked about authenticity, imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
listening, different types of power.
And all of those things, they contribute to cultivating presence,
Right.
which, as we talked about before, can really impact our ability to connect with other people, to influence decisions,
Right.
and to create positive change in the world.
And speaking of positive change, I want to circle back to Reverend Jeffrey Brown's work with the gang members. You mentioned earlier that he attributed a lot of his success to the power of listening.
Yes.
But he also said something really interesting about how important it was for him to be seen as trustworthy.
Absolutely. Remember, he was walking into this really tough environment. There was so much distrust and suspicion.
Yeah.
You know, those young men had been let down and betrayed by authority figures over and over again.
Yeah.
So Jeffrey knew that building trust was absolutely essential. He had to demonstrate that he wasn't there to judge them, to fix them, or to, exploit them in any way.
And he did that by being vulnerable, by sharing his own story,
Right.
and by consistently showing up with authenticity and compassion.
He basically had to break down all those preconceived notions of
Yeah.
what an authority figure should be
Exactly.
and replace them with something much more human and relatable.
I love that.
And you know what? I think that's something we can all learn from, whether we're dealing with, gang members or colleagues, family members, friends, whoever. Presence is about building bridges. It's about fostering connection. It's about creating a space where people feel safe enough to be themselves.
Absolutely.
And that's what allows for real dialogue, understanding, and ultimately positive change. So it's not just about projecting confidence or mastering some set of techniques.
No.
It's about something much deeper.
It's about cultivating that inner strength, that self-awareness.
That genuine desire to connect with other people on a human level.
It's about showing up as our full, authentic selves,
Yes.
warts and all,
Love that.
and trusting that even in our imperfections, we have something valuable to offer the world.
Beautifully said. I think that's a perfect place to transition to our final thoughts on
Yes.
this deep dive into presence.
As we've been talking about all these different aspects of presence, I keep thinking about that quote from Neil Gaiman
Oh, yeah.
about writing a novel.
Yeah.
He said that you never really figure out how to write a novel. You just learn how to write the novel that you're on.
Right.
And I was thinking that maybe presence is kind of similar,
Interesting.
you know? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really cool connection.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say is that maybe there's not just like one right way to have presence. Like
Right.
it's not a destination, it's
Right.
more of a journey.
Exactly. It's about showing up authentically in each moment and kind of navigating whatever challenges and opportunities come up along the way.
Yeah, like every novel is unique.
Yeah.
Every interaction requires a slightly different version of ourselves.
And that requires a lot of trust, doesn't it? Trust in ourselves, trust in the process,
Yeah.
trust that even when we make mistakes, we'll be able to course correct and keep moving forward.
Absolutely.
Speaking of mistakes, I used to think that presence was all about like projecting confidence,
Oh,
almost
interesting.
like you're putting on a performance.
Yeah.
But all these sources that we're looking at today, they've really challenged that idea for me.
It's easy to fall into that trap,
Yeah.
especially in a culture that, really values extroversion and charisma.
Right.
But true presence is so much more than that.
Yeah, it really is.
It goes much deeper than just like surface level charm.
Yeah, it's about connecting with your core values.
Yeah.
Really understanding your strengths and your weaknesses, being comfortable with who you are,
Yeah.
even the parts that, aren't so pretty.
Yeah. And it's that self-acceptance
Right.
that allows us to show up authentically. Right.
Without feeling like we have to pretend or put on some kind of act.
It's about embracing our full humanity, flaws and all.
I love that.
And when we do that,
Yeah.
we kind of give other people permission to do the same.
Right.
We give them permission to be imperfect, to be vulnerable,
Right.
to just be real.
That's when the real connection happens. When
Yeah.
we just drop all the masks, all the facades,
Right.
and just let ourselves be seen.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into presence,
Yeah.
I think the thing that's sticking with me the most is that it's not about reaching some perfect state of being.
Right.
It's really about embracing the journey,
Yeah.
the ups and downs, the moments of, brilliance and the moments of awkwardness.
It's about just showing up
Yeah.
as our authentic selves. One interaction, one conversation, one moment at a time.
And trusting that even with all of our imperfections,
Mm-hmm.
we still have something valuable to offer
Beautifully said.
for our listeners out there.
I would love to hear what's resonating with you.
Yeah.
What are you taking away from this deep dive? What's one small thing you can do today to cultivate a greater sense of presence in your own life?
Maybe it's working on self-affirmation or noticing when your inner critic starts to pipe up.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just taking a moment to really listen to someone without interrupting or judging.
Or maybe it's even simpler than that. Maybe it's just reminding yourself that you're enough,
Yeah.
just as you are, with all your quirks and imperfections.
Because at the end of the day, presence is about recognizing that our imperfections, they aren't things to be ashamed of.
Right.
They're really just part of what makes us unique,
Right.
part of what makes us valuable.
And when we can embrace that, I think we can unlock this whole new level of confidence and authenticity
Yeah.
that can change our lives and the lives of the people around us.
I love that.
So go out there,
yeah,
be present.
the world is waiting.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.